I'm Bill Zimfer. President Trump was barraged by questions today at a meeting with the president of Colombia. Question number one, what does he think of the appointment of a special counsel to look into Russian meddling in the election?
Well, I respect the move, but the entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion between certainly myself and my campaign. But I can always speak for myself and the Russians, zero.
Trump argued that there is more important business that the nation needs to focus on. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham says the Russia probe that began as a counterintelligence investigation seems to be evolving into a criminal one. The South Carolina Republican made the statement today after senators got a closed briefing from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Graham praised the selection of former FBI Director Robert Mueller as special counsel in the investigation, but said don't expect to hear much.
So one of the big losers in this decision is the public. We had a really good hearing with Yates and Clapper, where the public could hear what happened with Ms. Yates and Mr. Clapper. I think that opportunity has been lost, maybe for the greater good.
President Trump departs tomorrow on his first overseas trip as president. The first stop will be in Saudi Arabia, where Trump will talk with Arab leaders about boosting the fight against ISIS. Trump will then head to Israel for meetings with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Rome is the third stop on the 9-day presidential trip, where Trump will meet with Pope Francis. The stock market rebounded after suffering the worst day of trading since 2016. Investors were shaken yesterday by all the turmoil in Washington, D.C., but markets bounced back today. Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day 56 points higher at 20,663. The S&P 500 gained 9 points to 2366, and the Nasdaq rose 44 points, finishing at 6055. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
For several years, KCAA has been marketing the Youngevity brand of nutritional and personal care products. Our experience with Youngevity has been 100% positive, so we are pleased to recommend them to you. Regarding nutritional supplements, we recommend Pollen Burst in the berry flavor and Tangy Tangerine 2.0 in the tablet form. For regularity issues, we recommend 3-Day Cleanse, and for personal care, we recommend Morning Hydration Cream. You can shop online for Youngevity at www.kcaateam.com, or you can order by phone by calling 800-982-3197 and tell customer support that you are part of the KCAA team. Youngevity is an American company based in San Diego. Call Youngevity at 800-982-3197 monthly auto ship that allows you to buy Youngevity products at wholesale prices. That number again, 800-982-3197. KCAA is your CNBC News affiliate. We're the station that gets down to business.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the greatest real estate investment show ever. Here's the flip-flop investor himself, Todd Bayer.
Hey everyone, how we doing out there in Radio Land? This is the Flip Flop Investor Show, and I am your host, Todd Bayer, the Flip Flop Investor, as they call me apparently. Anyway, we get together every week and we talk about real estate investing here in the Inland Empire and abroad. We're actually going to talk about some out-of-state stuff today because we in the studio have a property manager who has managed property in more than just one state. Yep. For those of you that don't know, we talk about real estate investing here, and we usually bring on a local expert or we bring on somebody new to the real estate investing world and talk about real estate investing. So today we have Matthew Tandy from Formatic Property Management, right?
That's correct.
All right, I got it right. Thank you. I forgot my notes, which I usually do. I always forget my notes. But so Matt, you've been a property manager for like 10 years or something like that, right?
Yeah, coming up on 10 years here. So managed a little bit on my own, and then started rather came in second person and helped start my first management company back in 2009.
Okay, cool. And you started that was that here in California?
No, that was Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, Utah. Beautiful.
And a guy in a tiny little room.
Yeah. We were talking about that on the drive over here, being like the solo operator of a business, and something like property management. For those of you that out there that have ever rented a property, know that property managers are usually like inundated with stuff. There's always things to do as a property manager. So running stuff in Salt Lake City, I'm sure, is not much different as running things here in the Inland Empire?
There are some differences. I'd say the big difference is technology has improved a lot of things since back then. It's moved pretty rapidly into the field.
Mm-hmm. I know I was using a program called Buildium for my rentals for a little while there. I don't currently have any rentals right now, so we're not using it anymore.
It's terrible. We should fix that.
Well, one day it'll happen. I'm just waiting for the right opportunity to get back into the rental market here locally anyway. I know there's some good stuff out of state, but haven't really made that jump yet. Haven't really had the need to jump into out-of-state stuff because we're busy enough as it is here in the Inland Empire flipping property. But rentals are a very different kind of animal, and I know for you, I mean, it doesn't just start with a property that's for rent. I mean, you have to have you have to cultivate these deals from other people that own property, and walk us through the process that you'll go through on finding people with property. I mean, that's not always an easy thing to do. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, so definitely it depends on how long you've been in the area and what your marketing reach is. The biggest challenge in finding new clients, property management, when you're starting out is just the money. People think, oh, well, I'm just going to manage a property. How hard could it be? I know a guy who has a property and he needs me to help out. I'm just going to add up 3 more to that. But it's very competitive. The marketing costs are very high. Mm-hmm. And so most management companies, quote unquote, are really just sales guys doing it on the side. The way you find them is standard internet marketing is really successful right now. Most landlords are using their mobiles, so that's a big part. But ultimately, the goal is to cultivate in any market referral system, just like in flips.
Of course.
It's all about knowing the right people, and then in your initial client base might look like 90% what I call accidental landlords. They're people who don't really want to be a landlord; they just can't sell their home.
Okay.
But your goal is to flip it over time to maybe 30% of one-off landlords.
Okay.
That takes time.
So the one thing you mentioned was and I just blanked. It just gone. That's just what happened. Maybe that's what happens when you don't sleep a lot. No, I'm just kidding. I've been sleeping great lately, actually, because I got a new bed.
Oh,
but anyway,
is this like a paid marketing
spot? I know it's like a pay. Maybe I should hit those guys up over there at Sleep Train. No, no. You were talking about before, and man, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. But we were talking about getting people into property, and you were talking about marketing to people. And I'm just trying to recap in my mind because I don't have a play-by-play, and okay, so you get people into the property, and marketing. That's right. I was going to ask you if you do sales. So you mentioned that you do not. Most landlords, people that actually manage property managers, are also salespeople on the side, where they're typically marketing to people that want to sell a property. Do you guys handle sales at all, or are you just property management?
We handle sales, but a very limited and strict role. So a lot of if you know any real estate agents, you know that many of them try to be jack of all trades. Mm-hmm. They want to do commercial. They want to do residential. Sure. They want to do duplexes and 500-unit apartment complexes.
And not just residential, but they want to do $1 million listings, and they want to do the $100,000 listings.
So what's the difference between a home in the crime-ridden area of San Bernardino and the hills of L.A.? Nothing, right? It's all
of course.
The same.
It's all just real estate.
So the problem is that on sales, you can actually kind of play that a little bit. You're never going to be great since you're not focusing, but it's all sales and they're using the right forms. So property management is a whole different beast. Mm-hmm. In my experience, most sales guys make terrible property managers because it's so detail-oriented, so strict on the laws and the legal requirements.
Oh, yeah.
So, most of the property managers are really sales companies that are doing management on the side not because they like doing it or they're putting time and effort into the infrastructure, but because they want to save the sale for later. Say eventually that homeowner is going to want to sell the home. So I'll manage it for 3 years because I know I'm going to get the sale later. So we don't do that. I don't do Jack and Jill home buyer. If my best friend came up to me and said, hey, can you help me sell my home? I'd say probably not.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't help you buy a home.
Right.
But
you mean you don't want to do open houses and take buyers out on large, extravagant shopping sprees where they go out and look at every single property that's listed on the MLS right now? You don't want to do that?
Sure, when I have time in my life free again and I don't care about my family, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always the tough thing is balancing, work and personal home and everything like that.
That's right. So, I mean, our focus, the only kind of real estate sales and buying that we ever engage in is investment properties of the buy and hold nature.
Sure.
So, certainly we have clients who are always looking to add to their portfolio. We have clients who are looking to divest from part of their portfolio. So, we're really good at that. One of the challenges is for investors anywhere in the country is that the sales guy and the person selling the home on an investment property, often they're really massaging, is that a polite word? Massaging the word, that's a nice way to put it, massaging the numbers to make a property look more profitable on a buy and hold, whether it's a single family or a large multifamily. And one of the things that I've seen in thousands of properties that we've managed and tens of thousands that I've looked at is that most of the numbers are completely made up.
Oh, yeah.
So the reality is that the sales guys don't do property management on a daily basis. They really have no idea what the real rents are. They don't understand the cost of vacancy. And if they place a tenant in the property, they don't really have to deal with the consequences. So they really have no idea. Not that they're bad people, but and they do a great job for what they do, just not that area.
Right, of course. Yeah, and I've had lots of experience with real estate agents over the years, and there are definitely small stars out there, but I think real estate generally kind of follows that 80-20 rule where 80% of the business is done by 20% of the people in it. And it's not to say that every real estate agent's completely incompetent or anything like that, but there've been a lot of people that have come into real estate that clearly don't know what they're doing, and in some cases I feel that they're partly to blame sometimes for undue appreciation of the market, where people are pushing these higher sale prices and these higher rent prices and things like that. And sometimes I think that can actually negatively affect our industry. But, for the time being anyway, that seems to be wrangled fairly well. I mean, it's not as bad as I've seen it in the past, especially prior to the crash in 2007, 2008. The stuff happening prior to that was very exciting for all this, the terrible things people were doing. I mean, I couldn't believe some of the stuff people were getting away with. I don't want to get into it too much, but because it doesn't really focus on property management. But I've never really thought of it from a property manager's perspective of like all the different things that people do to boost up rental prices. So, what are some of the things people can kind of look out for if you're going to like rent a piece of property? What should a tenant be looking for?
So, the advice here is actually the same advice I give to landlords on how not to make a bad investment out of their investment property is the resources. And again, I got back into this. My wife and I bought our first rental property 07, somewhere around there, 08.
Great time.
Yeah, great time.
Terrible
time.
Yeah,
terrible. It was terrible
time.
time.
Yeah.
We actually, I'll go back and give a warning to investors about that story later. But the technology really has transformed the industry. Sales had it. They had, when the MLS became digital, everybody was blown away. And then, but the tenant side of things really lagged behind. But now, tenants have so many resources. We market a rental property on 70, 80 different websites.
Yeah.
You got to cast that big net. And these websites let them really drill down into all the nitty-gritty of the property. And they a tenant will look at the life cycle of a tenant in that process is a lot shorter than for a buyer. They'll look at 200 properties in the course of a couple nights. They'll make a list of 30 of them. They'll drive by those properties all in one day.
Yeah.
And then they'll call you right from the front door and say, I want to view this home. And if you say, well, I'll be there in an hour, they're gone. So,
yeah.
And
so you got to place digital locks on all the doors that you can unlock from your desk, right?
Digital locks, you got to monitor it. There's all sorts of things here and screen processes. But from the tenant side, what we see is that the tenants are much more picky because they can be. Back in the day, it wasn't common to say, oh, I'm not going to do anything to that property. It's just a rental property. Well, the statistics, the NARPM, the National Association of Property Managers, real property managers. They put out statistics on these all the time, and what we see is that the Southern California has the second highest amount of renters per capita than the rest of the entire country. And that the average demographic, we used to look at renters as people who they rented because they couldn't buy, right? I mean, why rent when you could buy?
Sure, they're in transition.
But now it's not that way. The vast majority of renters are probably going to rent for their lifetimes. If they buy a property, it's going to be an investment property to rent out to someone else.
Yeah.
And they want to stay 4, 5, 6, 7 years in the rental property. They have kids. They have stable jobs, more stable than many home buyers had many years ago. They have good prospects. And so what happens is that for the recommendation for renters is that, hey, you don't have to settle for being in the slum. And one of the things that renters look for, and renters should look for, is quality. Because what we find is that I try to be selective in the clients that we work with. We are very picky in that. And if I get a client who still has they're just a renter mindset, well, occasionally we'll still work with them under certain conditions, but sometimes they're fighting. And they say, well, I'm not going to patch that up. I'm not going to go do that. And they can't understand why this property that used to rent so well 10 years ago still won't rent today. And, vacancy is a big cost. That's a big cost that should be avoided. So renters have been burned over and over. The Internet is a favorite place for all the people who have been burned, and they say, look, I don't want your promises that you'll paint this room. I don't want your promises that you'll be out in time for me to move in. I wanted to see it vacant. I want to see it rent ready because promises are cheap.
Yeah.
And so for renters, the advice is generally be picky. You have the options. The tools are out there.
True.
And but on the flip side, be prepared to pay more rent.
Well, of course, yeah. I know I saw one on your website today. One of the properties that are currently available for rent on your site had like a checkerboard living room, black and white checkerboard in front of the fireplace.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. That one, actually, we were talking about that on the way here. That's the older lady who I'm doing as close to a pro bono as I'll ever get.
Yeah.
Sad situation. Husband passed away a few months ago and been married for almost 60 years. And a lot of people are taking advantage of her. So I said, look, I'll take it in. And honestly, 9 out of 10 conversations is counseling.
Yeah, I know.
But she doesn't have the money. But we had to explain to her that look, you're tired of people skipping and having all these bad tenants. But this is kind of what's going to happen here. So it's sat vacant we average about 6 days to place a tenant. This property, we're probably about 3 weeks. We would have had it rented a week ago, but she got really sick and she was in the hospital. But yeah, that checkerboard kind of pattern, it looks even worse in person.
Yeah. I know that tile. That's that VCT like stick down tiles.
That's right. In fact, as a case in point of how picky tenants are, we send out automated surveys to everybody who views any of our properties because we're always tracking what's happening.
Yeah.
And I've had 5 different people go through. Now we've had like 50 or 60.
Sure.
But 5 of them specifically said, "What is wrong with the flooring? There are 5 different types of flooring in this house."
They have the fake parquet-looking VCT stuff in there too.
That's right. They'll say, "I will rent it if you either drop the price $400 or if you replace the flooring to be consistent."
Yeah.
Of course, you can't do this, so we work with it. But absolutely, as an investment property owner, if you're going to invest in an investment property, don't think that it's not going to matter to tenants because it matters.
Yeah. Do you think she would ever consider, rather than owning it and renting it out, do you think she would ever consider selling it with a carryback, and instead of getting rental income, she'll actually get like a mortgage income essentially, and then that would allow somebody else could basically, I might know a guy. I might know at least one guy out there that would, then use a little bit, spend some money to fix the property up, put in carpet where carpet should be, things like that. You think she'd ever be interested in something like that?
Absolutely. In fact, we're pushing her to that. I think right now it's just so close. The difficulty is, and you've seen these situations too, I know, Todd, is that she raised her family in this house, and it's her dream thing. So she's not ready to, even on paper, let it go to anyone else.
I know.
We proposed master leases. We proposed, sell a carry, reverse mortgage even. But We think probably in about a year she'll be ready.
Yeah, that's
I'll call you up
sentimental.
for that.
Oh, hey, great. I love those phone calls. Yeah, I mean, the sentimental attachment people get to homes. I mean, we've dealt with that so many times, and I know a lot of times we just walked a property not that long ago in Pasadena where there's like 5 children, and it's being managed by the oldest brother, and they're all sentimental about this house, and this house was like not just the party house for them, but for the entire extended family. That they all moved from Italy. It was like a huge deal, and like, they wanted to make sure that because we were going to buy it, renovate it, and resell it. That was our intent. We let them know that, but they wanted to like be a part of the rehab process and like really make sure we were like honoring the home and honoring their parents and this and that. And it's like, yeah, like we're not going to like tear the home apart. Like we have no care for it, but like maybe you guys aren't ready to sell is kind of what we kind of got to with them, where we're like, I don't think you're really ready to sell this property. Like, cause we're going to tear this home apart. Like there's a lot that we need to do to make it something that a normal person's going to want to buy. I mean, this is a home that had been added on to for 50, 60 years, and it's got all these weird things going on with it to a normal buyer that's looking to buy and move their home, their new family into a new home. They're going to look at this place and say, what's with the Rialto Bridge replica in the middle of the, I don't know what you'd call that, the mezzanine level? I don't know. This property was interesting. It's probably one of the more interesting properties we've ever walked.
Wow.
But then on top of that, we had the family that just couldn't seem to let go of the property. So we're like, okay, I don't think you guys are ready for this. Here's our offer, but we're not that married to it, just so you know.
Yeah, and you see that all the time in rental times too. The accidental landlords, people who, they raise their family there. Mm-hmm. We have several properties, and it's like pulling teeth, and they think. The problem is that they can't step back. Many of them do successfully step back and look at it as, hey, this is now an investment.
Sure.
But some of them, they just can't let go. Sometimes that's why they're not even selling, because they can't let go.
Yeah.
And you walk into, for instance, we have this great client, but his house, he raises kids there, and the bathroom shower tile is about 8 different colors.
Seeing that.
And he... it's hard to break it to them sometimes, because when we walk into that bathroom, he starts expounding on how amazing this is and all the meaning to it. And you're going to tell him you got to rip that out.
Yeah.
And we ended up renting it out without ripping it out. It was harder to rent out.
Yeah.
And, if you're in that position, if anyone listening is in that position, that's okay. If you want to keep the sentimental things, that's okay.
Sure.
But be reasonable about the returns and how that's going to affect vacancy. You were talking about what a modern family wants to move into. Absolutely. I mean, we deal in probabilities.
Right.
Yeah, I can't guarantee if you do these things that you'll get a renter, but I can say the probability of having a 5-week vacancy versus a 1-week vacancy goes up dramatically if you don't do certain things.
Yeah.
So, people, the worst is murals. People paint murals on their kids' room. They say, you cannot paint over that. Are you planning on moving back in? No, but it meant so much to my daughter.
Yeah. Well, what if the people that want to move in don't have a daughter?
Right.
I don't think he's going to really like having a pink room with butterflies everywhere. I'm sorry,
Sure. I mean, look, some guys like princesses. That's fine.
But yeah, but who knows? They may not.
Right.
Tenants usually have the rights to paint interior. That's at least I would give them the ability to. You don't always let them do that?
Actually,
it depend on the owner?
Yes, the way it works is that in the lease you should always say tenant cannot do any change to the property without getting written permission.
Sure.
And all that is to make sure that they're not doing doing it themselves and doing it looking crappy.
Yeah.
They put money in and it's fine. So yes, I encourage most owners to say, hey, as long as they're not trying to paint it like black or something, I'm okay.
Yeah. See, I'm okay with it because I guess in my mind, and this is sort of the Dave Tilney model of property management, which is get your tenant to move in, make it their own, because they'll stay longer because they're more comfortable in it. So, I would encourage them to make it their own in any way they see fit, as long as they're not like tearing out walls and completely replacing everything in the property.
So Dave Tilney and I disagree on this.
Okay.
And here's the thing, and I'll say this about Dave Tilney. Lots of good advice, lots of experience, but when I say the industry has changed in the last decade because of technology, it has really changed. And unfortunately, one of those changes is the amount of tenant rights websites and groups that their whole goal is to screw you as a landlord
Right.
and say, you know what, you're the nameless corporate person, you own a property, let's see how much we can get away with. Unfortunately, if you just say, hey, you have carte blanche, I'd probably just match
Carte blanche?
Carte blanche. Carte blanche to do whatever you want, then they will do whatever they want. It can turn into disaster. I'm a big believer, statistically, we've seen that over thousands of properties, that if you are very strict on the lease, but you put in a clause there that says, but ask me, essentially. I mean, legal speak, but ask me.
Sure.
And if I put it in writing, then fine. And then if it's something that's a material change, you say, okay, you can paint this room. It's going to cost me $300 to paint it back if you don't do it. So give me an extra $300 security deposit. You can paint the room. That's fine. I'm going to inspect it. It has to be done by these standards. And then you're okay. But unfortunately, if they do whatever they want, especially with the rise of HGTV and all these other things, they get these crazy ideas.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're going to have wallpaper everywhere. And I hate wallpaper.
Most people do.
And,
We talked about this last week, actually.
yeah.
Let's talk about wallpaper. 80% of people hate wallpaper. The other 20% hate your wallpaper.
Yeah, well,
That's the general rule.
that's absolutely true. And anyone with a rental property, please get rid of your wallpaper.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
try
I know.
patching that. You can't patch wallpaper. It's a
No,
nightmare.
wallpaper's tough. You know, you have to try to get it off the best you can, but you never get all the sticky stuff off. You know, you end up like we actually in our offices we just renovated. And you just saw there was wallpaper on those walls, and yeah, we had to take the wallpaper off, and then we had to skim coat the walls to make them smooth again, then retexture them because otherwise there's still residue left over from the wallpaper. That stuff is it's bulletproof in some cases, which is good. If you like wallpaper and you want to stay, it's gonna stay if you do it right.
Well, you know, again, though, it just goes back to, and people say, well, that's not very stylish or thing. Look, your goal is to rent it out,
Yeah.
appeal to the broadest appeal. I'm very generic. All of our walls, when we're repainting, they're all sandcastle. It's a Dunn Edwards. It's all sandcastle.
Yeah.
Eggshell sheen. By the way, don't ever do flat paint. Please
Right.
don't ever put flat paint in a rental.
Yeah.
Eggshell sheen. It's durable but not too glossy.
And it's
Semi-gloss.
still fairly washable,
Still fairly washable. It doesn't suck up the oils from all the kids who put their hands on the wall.
right?
You know, semi-gloss in the wet areas. I just, you know, I have, if I have to put in carpet, I use it's called a sparkled brown, and it's hides dirt well. And,
Yeah.
you know, you keep it durable, you keep it simple, and it appeals to most people. Whereas
Right.
the pink room is going to appeal to a far
With the
smaller
distressed
audience.
wood accent wall and all that, you don't go that.
Oh,
You don't go
yeah.
that far out.
No. Yeah, it's only when I have a client who's not being very good.
Or if you're renting stuff up in the Beverly Hills area, you know, you need to, you got to appeal to a different tenant over there. But I'm sure most of the tenants you're dealing with are here in the Inland Empire,
Yep.
and are more or less working class people. They just want to have a nice place to live and have raise their family.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like saying, the demographic now is, more people now than ever say that they plan to rent for, the next decade. Not because they have to, but because they want to. And, it's working class here. It's blue collar, white collar. I mean, probably about 40% of my tenants make $150,000 to $250,000 a year.
Wow.
And so it's not a matter of money.
No.
But they're picky, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, when you get into that income bracket, you have the right to be picky.
that's right, you do. But even the people in the lower income brackets, they're just as picky, just as demanding. Here's the thing: if they're not picky and demanding, they may not be your best tenant to begin with, because they obviously don't care about a lot of things, including your property.
Yeah, and actually, some of my favorite tenants I had over the years were the ones that were vocal, and when something went wrong, they'd tell me immediately, as opposed to the people that would just sort of let it go, because the ones that let it go, they don't do anything about it, and then you come in when you're doing their final walkout, and you're like, what happened here? And they're like, oh, yeah, that thing broke years ago, and, this cabinet drawer fell out, and you're like, what? How come you never called and said anything, and it was funny because people would tell me like that. I didn't want to bother you. You're always so busy. It's like, oh, but it's my property. Like, I care about the property. Like, call me if something breaks. Like, I don't want it broken and getting worse.
Properties are cheap. Properties are cheap. It's fine.
Yeah, properties are so cheap. Like, yeah, I'll just go buy another one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. I don't know. I like tenants, but anyway.
Well, you got to set up again, I'm really big on contracts and strictness and
Of course, disclosure.
and so there's certain things that you can do to limit tenant damage, right?
Of course.
I mean, tenant damage can be expensive. I get clients that come to me and they've been renting out the properties for years all themselves, and they say, oh, so I just spent $6,000 on it, 2 years ago, and I think I'm going to spend another $5,000 this time. And 4 years ago, short tenancies,
Right.
I spent like $12,000 and they didn't treat it right. Well, first off, are you doing inspections, real inspections with photos? Do the tenants know you're going to be doing the inspections in writing? We check on the property. I mean, any property manager for anyone anywhere in the country, maybe. It's here's what you should look for in a property manager. And this isn't me selling myself. There's lots of great companies that do this, but there's lots of companies that say they do and don't. So you need to look online, talk to a few people. You should always ask to talk to a couple of the current clients. They should be doing random drive-bys where the tenants know what happens, they just don't know when.
Yeah.
And if the grass is overgrown or there's a bunch of extra vehicles or the blinds are broken, that should be cause to immediately enter or give a 24-hour notice, because you do have to give a 24-hour notice to enter the property, because every 2 months, if they're willing to let the world see something crappy, what's happening on the inside?
Right.
And then we put clauses in where if we fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen, we do an inspection of the entire home. And then we also do a photo document inspection. And the great thing, again, this is the tools. Photo document inspections used to be very rare. They still are rare. But now most of the good managers have software that's already bundled into it. They can do it, and it's room by room. They're checklists, and you're checking off like kitchen floor, kitchen cabinets. You take photos. And so you do all that, and you find that tenants, they when they know that someone's going to be checking on them, they treat it really well. And it's not, some people say, aren't you afraid that they're going to not feel at home, as you're saying, that make it their own. As long as you're respectful to them, you don't call them up for anything if you don't need to,
Yeah.
they're completely okay. They're, and really you sell it to them, and this should be the attitude of the property managers, not just a check-in on them. We legitimately care about the tenants. Our fiduciary duty is to the client, but to the tenants, we don't want them to live in a crap condition. And unfortunately, a lot of them have lived in crap conditions, and they're afraid to say anything. They're afraid to be penalized if they report a leaking toilet or something like that. We just want to know, because we don't want the problem to get out of hand.
Sure.
And so when you go in and if you're self-managing, do the same thing. By the way, self-managers can absolutely do this. Check in on the property, say, hey, I just want to check to see if there's anything I can do to make it a little better for you. And that preserves the property value for the owner, which owners love, and that keeps the tenants in there for a very long time.
And you mentioned overgrown lawns, and I wish that were always my problem. I wish there was always more grass there than what I gave them in the beginning, because there was always less. I would come to a brown lawn or no lawn, know.
Yeah, so I will say this. The one area I strongly believe that every landlord should be unabashedly strict in is in tenant damages or negligence. A lot of times we hear things where we take over a property or things like that, and the situation is that the tenant, first off, we ask the tenant when the last time they saw the property manager was. Oh, when they rented it to me 4 years ago.
Right.
Great. That explains why we're going to have to take out all the carpet.
Yeah, exactly.
But the other thing is that when a blind is broken and the tenant says, hey, we broke this, you don't just say, okay, well, you're going to have to replace that before you move out 5 years from now.
Right.
You say, okay, you have 7 days to fix it, send me a photo, otherwise we're going to send our guys in and fix it. Because what happens is if you let these things get out of hand, Todd, is that they snowball.
Oh, yeah.
And, once tenants understand that you're going to be checking, you care, well, they start caring, and they live in a nicer place. And studies have shown, the nicer and cleaner your place is, the more careful you are going to be in the future.
Yeah.
So it's a nice, it's not a vicious cycle, it's a happy cycle.
So let me ask you this, because I get asked a lot. I'm going to put it on you this time. What is considered normal wear and tear?
Whatever the local judge on the docket says that day. No, the normal wear and tear is typically defined as chips of paint missing, minor damage to walls and floors, so worn out areas, stains in front of the couch that the oil stains that develop there. A nail or two can be, but there's a workaround on that. So that's really normal wear and tear. Some tenants are like, well, I wore it out, so that's how it is. But yeah, in an area where the carpet gets worn out, it can tear. But if the carpet is good other than that tear in the carpet, then no, that's damage that the tenant caused.
Yeah.
And you can charge them for that. A good example of this is nail holes. So we are very strict. It may sound silly to some people, but again, I've done so many that nail holes is a big deal. Number one advice I give to investors on the simplest thing they can do to give them the best shot long term is to, when they rent out the home for the very first time, make sure there are no nail holes in the wall. And what's happened is that there's been different cases where if you as a landlord leave 2 nail holes on your wall and the tenant adds 3, and you say, well, geez, that's like an increase of 100% increase, over 100% increase of nail holes, and it looks more noticeable. Well, the judge would typically look at that, and most people would say, well, but they're already nail holes. What's the difference, right?
Yeah.
But if you start with no nail holes and the tenant leaves a single nail hole, well, now they've materially changed that wall.
It was a whole free home.
It's a whole free hole at home, absolutely. And so you patch it up, and then you can charge them for every nail hole when they move out, and that way, 10 years from now, even if you have 5 tenants, if you're consistent on that, then the condition you have your home in when the very first tenant moved in is going to be the same condition, if not better than when your tenant moves out 10 years from now.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So is there usually a time frame that goes along with that too? Like if a tenant is only there for 6 months and there's paint chips in the walls, there's the oil thing along the couch back and all that stuff. 6 months, that seems a little short to me anyway, to have those kinds of things already happening to the home. Like the obvious trails that have made it through the home, like, the paths, they're like a darker color of the carpet, and you're like, okay, that's their walking path. They must have had a coffee table there. I know we've had that. So obviously, what would be a normal time period, and does the normal wear and tear thing sort of change over the years? So if they've been in there for 5 years versus 1 year?
There is, and this is where it gets tricky with some of those tenant rights websites. So I deal with this one regularly, unfortunately, is that the way it works is that if you have to replace it, so if you have to clean it, you have to clean it, right? That's just part of what the tenant has to pay for it and move out anyways. And by the way, you should always have your carpets cleaned, house detailed, not cleaned by the homeowner. Don't clean it yourself. Get a professional out there with the receipt, because then you can require that of the tenant. And that's the key, right, to this, is that whatever you did before the first tenant moved in is what the tenant has to do when they moved out. So make sure it's all looking good. And then, if they have stains in there, then you can charge extra for the stain removal. In some cases, if they put a bleach spot or something like that, or they tried to clean it with bleach.
If only. I wish they tried to clean it every time.
You think that, but those bleach marks are worse than the red marks
sometimes.
Yeah, I know. So you could have the carpet re-dyed. We do that as a nice in-between solution. And you can absolutely bill the tenant for that, even if they've only been there for 6 months, because it's an expense that you wouldn't have had otherwise. But there does come a point where, let's say the tenant's been there for 5 years.
Yeah.
And you had put
spills are going to happen. Like, you're going to spill something. It's just inevitable.
Yeah, well, funny enough, spills often aren't considered under normal wear and tear.
Yeah, that's what's weird. And I know spills come up a lot because it, damages the color of the carpet. So this is why it comes up a lot.
Yeah, for most spills, you can charge them for because that normal wear and tear typically just means things that happen as you're walking. So you move something, and of course, on the corner of the wall, where the two walls meet at a 90-degree angle, there's going to be pieces of paint missing. Of course, on the stairwell, pieces of paint are going to be missing. Kids go up and down. That happens.
Right.
A fist-sized hole in a wall doesn't just happen. Even if it does, I legitimately did have someone who, and I know them personally, so I believe them completely on this. They started falling down the stairs, and they put their hole through the wall. So that was an accident.
Yep.
They weren't doing anything unusual, but they still have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So spills fall into that same category, absolutely.
Yeah. So those people out there that are spilling their juice or their red wine or whatever, their spaghetti sauce on the carpet out there.
That's right. No, it
does not fall under normal wear and tear. I've tried to tell people this. They believe it is.
Yeah, and so there's particularly one website that's popped in California. I'm not going to name it because I don't want to give it more publicity.
Yeah.
But it tries to give a summary of tenant rights.
Yeah.
And it does so in a fairly neutral way. It's not a bad website. But one of the things it does, which has been frustrating, is it says things like, well, if the carpet would normally last 7 years and they had it for 4 years before you moved in, and you live there for a year and they have to replace it, then you owe 2 years of carpet or something like that. Would be a normal estimation. But there's no law that says that.
Right.
And so tenants come up with their own crazy things. One of the most common is painting. They say, well, you have to repaint every time people move out anyways, even if they've only been there for a year. I'm like, no, paint should last for a long time.
Right.
So, yeah, they'll try to come up with all things. They'll threaten us. I mean, I think I've had a bad day in the office if someone hasn't threatened me in some way or said I'm going to hell or something like that.
Right.
But, yeah.
Well, it happens.
Right.
So, actually, I haven't even really mentioned anything yet. I want to talk about the club for a sec.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you've come to the Inland Empire Real Estate Investment Club. So,
Absolutely.
we're the biggest club biggest club in the Inland Empire for sure, but we're like one of the 5 largest ones in California now. So, very exciting for those of you people out there that are looking to get into real estate investing. Before you go to any one of those expensive seminars that teach you how to be a real estate investor, come out to our club. We meet at the Mission Inn once a month at 6:30 p.m. is when we start, and that's on the 4th Wednesday. This month will be, it's actually next Wednesday. It's coming right up.
Yeah, coming up.
So next Wednesday is, of course, for those of you that are looking at your calendar right now and want to write this down, it's going to be May 24th at 6:30 p.m. at the Mission Inn in Riverside. We get together and talk about real estate investing, network, have some education. We usually have a very engaging speaker that we interview on stage. Not a speaker, I shouldn't say that. We never have speakers, but we do have people that are local investors, just like Matt here, and we talk about real estate investing in whatever area their expertise is in. So a lot of times it's flippers, but we have other people that do other things in real estate. We actually have a guy that's going to be, I'm not supposed to mention it, but nobody's going to tell on me. So I think we're going to have a guy that does buy and hold this month, actually. So
all right.
it actually ties in nicely here. But he's a buy and hold guy that does it very untraditionally. He doesn't just buy the home with a mortgage and then rent it out or buy it with cash. He's a very different guy. He uses a lot of seller financing. So those are people that out there that want to get a very creative look at how to become a landlord in California. Come check out our meeting this week or next week. It's going to be a good time. We also do some other events every month. We do a happy hour where we get together at a local bar, restaurant, and just sort of network. It's free. Just come on by, meet us, meet other people, other investors, bring some business cards, have a drink or have some food, whatever you want to do. Whatever fits your fancy, I guess. And we're going to be doing that at a place called W. Wolfskill in downtown Riverside. That'll be on June 9th. So come on out and check that one out. It starts at 5 o'clock, goes till about 8. We'll also be doing a Saturday morning coffee. Normally we'll be doing that the Saturday before our main meeting, which would be this Saturday, which we're not doing it this Saturday. We're doing it the following Saturday. So we're doing it on Saturday, May 27th at Lift Coffee in Riverside. That's going to start at 8 in the morning and go until about 10 or 11 o'clock, depending on whenever the conversation just gets so boring I got to go. No, we usually hang out there for a little bit. So, I'm forgetting Cash Flow. Cash Flow game. We play Cash Flow. This is a board game created by Robert Kiyosaki, and Matt was there last week, or this month anyway. We do that always on the first Wednesday at the Bar and Grill Company in Yucaipa, which is a very, very nice little restaurant there. That will be at 6 o'clock at the Bar and Grill Company in Yucaipa. Come play Cash Flow. It is like, it's kind of like Monopoly. It's a game created by Robert Kiyosaki for learning how to invest in real estate using creative financing and all kinds of great stuff, working together with people, creating partnerships. A lot of fun. It's kind of like a real estate seminar in a box, I guess. But all those are free. The only one we charge for is the main meeting at the Mission Inn. We charge $20 because they don't let us in for free at the Mission Inn. I wish they did, but they don't. So for those of you that want to foot the minimal cost of $20 to come meet local investors, come check us out. And if you need more information, you can always go up on meetup.com and look up the Inland Empire Real Estate Investment Club. With that said, we'll get back to our talk with Matt Tandy here about property management. And I want to talk to you about the investment side.
Sure.
Because we're kind of talking about tenant side, tenant management, stuff like that. But I wanted to jump in with you about buying rental property, because this is something a lot of people want to do. And you own some rentals. You mentioned you own one with your wife.
We have, yeah. I sold, when I started for Matic, I sold everything to focus on this, but I'll probably start again in another year or two.
Yeah.
Personally. So I have done it. I have lots of experience in helping others too. I have good stories, bad stories. Been there.
So if you're looking to buy new property next year, okay, so me in my own mind, I'm thinking traditionally, when I'm going to buy a rental property, most people would assume you're buying it with either cash or some kind of a retirement account, or you're buying it with partner money, or you're buying it with a standard mortgage, something like that. I think a lot of people think of it in that respect. Is that kind of the method you're looking to employ to buy property, or how are you looking to do it?
I'm an open-minded guy on that, just like you are when it comes to making any other kind of real estate deal.
Yeah.
Whatever makes the numbers work in a low-risk way. I mean, here's the thing. You shouldn't be investing in a buy-and-hold real estate in a rental property that has a high risk value to it. The whole purpose is to be a stable passive income well into the future. Now, that doesn't always mean that it's cash flowing from month one.
Right.
I mean, I would take a deal where, if the market's going up, I'd take a deal where I'm losing $100 a month if I know that in 5 years I could sell it for an extra $150,000, or I know the rents in those areas are going up $100 a year because I know it'll cash flow, for my lifetime.
Sure.
So
I would call that speculative.
Well, so here's the thing. Well, we'll talk about the speculative part. Sorry, I keep doing that.
This table's not very stable. For those of you wondering what that noise is, it's because we adjusted ourselves and knocked the table a little bit.
That's right. We'll talk about the speculative part in a minute here, but the reality is that financing can be done many ways, just like anything else. You could do a master lease. If you have no money to buy a rental property, a master lease is a way to do it. I think actually Tilney is the one who
Tilney's one of the guys, yeah.
Loves those. It's harder to get that to happen these days, but there's still good master lease options out there.
Sure.
But yeah, the traditional is that you do 20%, 30% down, and you finance it as long as it's cash flowing. Then it really doesn't matter how much your mortgage is, right? As long as it's going to cash flow every month.
Right. As long as you can make it up if you don't have a tenant living in there, because sometimes you do have to afford those vacancy periods where you're not earning any income from the property.
Yeah, and certainly I see people getting into it who aren't calculating realistically everything.
Oh, sure.
You should absolutely, on a rental property, be very conservative in all of your numbers. And then if it gets better, then, great. You have an unplanned for a trip to Cancun or something.
Yeah, go somewhere nice. What are so some of the numbers that you're considering when you're buying a rental property? And I know I could spout off some things you should always consider. What are some things like okay, so you're a property manager, and I mean I know the cost of a property manager. I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't include in there because they think they're going to self-run the property, which to me is kind of a bad idea if you don't do this already professionally. If you're not already in real estate, managing your own property could be a really bad idea, in my opinion. So for those people out there that need to get into a property manager, what are they looking to spend on a property manager?
Well, so property managers have a wide array of different levels of service and fees. So a lot of managers who are just kind of on the side, they stick with the standard 10%. For those who have volume such as us, we can offer discounts. So we usually do 6.9% ourselves. Then there's a premium service that you can add on. And this is our thing. We like to be honest about this. Most people don't need the premium service. It's really for just nervous Nellies, first-time landlords who need us to call them every month to let them know their house hasn't burned down. But then there's also, I call them the discount managers. They will do it for dirt cheap. They're not going to inspect your home usually. They're not going to do those things, but they'll collect the rent.
Yeah,
and
hopefully,
and do the accounting. But they'll kind of put in whoever. And the reality is that's not a bad category if you have something in a bad neighborhood. I'm not going to manage those areas, so someone has to.
Yeah. And
they can create value that you couldn't yourself. So, yes, you should absolutely calculate that in. Now, I do say, Todd, that if you've never invested in buy and hold real estate ever, your very first investment property should be something simple, like a single-family home.
Sure.
Don't go buy like an 8-plex. Just buy a single-family home, even if it's not going to pencil very amazingly. And maybe manage it yourself, or at least the turnover part for a couple months. Get a feel for it. This is the same advice for flippers. Go and at least on your first job, see how they do some things, because eventually Yeah, I tell this is my clients too. Eventually, they'll be investing in an area where I'm not, and I don't want them to get shafted.
Yeah, and they don't call it like a multiplex for no reason. It's because they're complex. You know, it's a complex. They're complex. All right, so let's assume I had a whole bunch of cash I wanted to throw at you to buy property, and you have the option. You can either buy 100 single-family residences, or you can buy a 100-unit apartment complex. What would you buy? It's a tough one.
Is that a trick question?
It's not a tough one. It's not a trick question. It's a question I like to ask people because it really gives me an idea of what type of stuff they like to deal with.
So, really depends on where those 100 homes are and where that apartment is, and really cap rates and ROI, not cap rates. ROI matters more than a cap rate.
Yeah.
ROI, of course, for those who don't know the difference, cap rate is if there wasn't a mortgage or other things. ROI includes all the money in on that. ROI is going to matter. The nice thing about an apartment complex is the risk is spread out. But is it like a tax credit apartment complex? There's all sorts of variances. One thing, I've evaluated over 100 large multifamily complexes in the last decade. We're talking 50-page evaluations, and every single one, the numbers were completely made up by the seller.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, they were hiding things. I mean, it's the amount of fraud really is what it is that goes on and unreported is just massive. So, if you do your due diligence, the 100 complex can be great if it's in a good area and has high occupancies and has a good rate up. I personally like single-family homes and small multifamily because I feel that having a larger geographic area, as long as you have a manager, is nice because if one area goes down, so for instance, when San Bernardino went bankrupt, if you had an apartment complex in San Bernardino, how was that for those apartment complex owners?
Not great. There's a lot of property in downtown San Bernardino that's completely vacant.
Yeah.
Office buildings, all kinds of stuff.
But if you had 100 properties and 15 of them were in San Bernardino, but then you had others in Riverside and you had others in Diamond Bar, well, you rode out those little micro economic problems pretty well.
Yeah.
So now, the real answer is that you'd see if you could buy 50 homes and then a 50-plex. That's the real answer. I like to diversify real estate just like anyone else.
Sure. Yeah, and so I like to ask that question just because it's kind of gives you an idea of where people are too. I think because. Like those multiplexes sound great on paper. Like it sounds like all your problems are in one spot. Like there's an issue there, but the thing is, problems can be created in one spot too. I know of, in one case, there was a gang that moved into an apartment complex. Actually, I think it was a 92-unit apartment complex.
Is that where my wife and I moved when we first got married?
Could have been.
That's what it was like.
Yeah, a gang had moved in, and they were running drugs and prostitution through this place, and it's like, okay, now they're not paying rent, and you have like kind of a thuggy gang that's like now in there. The property managers vacated; they left.
Yeah.
It became a real problem for the owner, and they didn't know what to do about it. And law enforcement wasn't helping, and it was just it was a nightmare for them. But what are you supposed to do? So they if they had property spread out, the idea of a gang moving in all their properties at once would be very unlikely. So, but you could also have 10 homes that need a roof that you just found out in the first winter storm,
Right.
Or like in the first summer heat, you get people
first
that call
rain in 9 months, something like that might happen here.
Yeah, exactly. The first rain in 9 months. Well, we kind of had some rain the other day, but now that the heat's going to be coming back, there's going to be a lot of people with like air conditioning problems, which you're not actually required to maintain an air conditioning in California. You're not required to provide cooling.
So here's how that works. This is another tricky part. Is the answer or the real answer to that is yes and no. So any material part of the home that was functional or was believed, the impression was given as functional when the tenant moved in, you must maintain. So if the dishwasher goes out, you can't tell the tenant, well, I don't use the dishwasher.
Yeah.
You can't, because the dishwasher, for all you know, may have been one of the factors they were looking for. Certainly cooling. The cooling goes out.
In a place like Southern California.
Right. Now, if there was no air conditioner there to begin with, or you put in marketing that, hey, the air conditioner is non-functional, we're not going to repair it, you have no obligation to put it in there.
Yeah. I saw a case where this happened where everybody assumed that there was air conditioning in the home. There was a forced air unit in the home. There was vents and everything like that. But the thing is, they didn't look completely into it. It was not an air conditioning system. It was a central heating system.
Yeah.
and there was no cooling, and this was an issue that came up on a property in Lake Elsinore. It was kind of funny, because, and I saw the property myself. I actually thought it had air conditioning, central air conditioning too, because when you see the forced air unit,
you just assume. Who
yeah,
wouldn't?
I didn't assume that there was no coil anywhere, and I never looked to see if there was a compressor outside. There wasn't, or a condenser. I mean, there was no condenser. We found that out later, but central heat in a home was, but that's what was provided, and therefore that's all that's actually required to be provided, right? Is central heat, or heat of some kind.
Yeah, and so different municipalities have their own rules, so you need to check that region, city by city. But statewide, yes, I believe it's just the heat.
Yeah, so they, and obviously if the heat goes out, it's got to get fixed. Which, whatever, it's not a big deal right now. Nobody's caring about the heat too much anymore. I hope not, anyway.
Right.
But that's the break. So if you're looking to become a real estate investor and you want to buy some rental property, people should definitely reach out to Matt Tandy over from Matic Property Management in Riverside. You want to give a phone number or a website or anything like that?
Sure. The corporate line here, which often I'm the one answering, is 951-394-0030. Again, that's 951-394-0030. Our website is Formatic, Formatic PM, like property manager. .com. So formaticpm.com. We have a great website. It's very informational. Our fees are right on there. Now, if you're an investor, or if you mention this radio show, we'll give you a discount.
Hey.
Just don't spread it too far. Although Todd wants to spread
it to as many people as you want.
Todd
Don't
wants to
listen to that.
But, the reality is something for everybody. If you're looking to buy investment property, a service that I offer for free, because I do believe in giving back to the community, is that if you send me a couple properties, send it to me email, or give me a call, I will run some real comps on it, and that way you know what the real numbers are, the real vacancy rates are in that area, and no charge for that. I'll do I have one person who sends me about 20 or 30 a month.
Wow.
And I don't even manage for them.
Oh, man.
But they haven't bought a property either. So, yeah, we're happy to do that and help out and make sure you don't get into a bad deal.
Well, awesome, Matt. I really appreciate you coming out. And for those of you that want to meet Matt, too, personally, he's going to be at the next Real Estate Investment Club meeting, because it is the place to meet all these real estate investors and people of that sort. And for those of you that didn't catch it earlier, come check out the Inland Empire Real Estate Investment Club. We meet at the Mission Inn every month on the fourth Wednesday. That is coming up. It'll be next Wednesday, which is May 24th. And we start at 6:30. Kick off the whole thing around 7, and everything will be a lot of fun. You'll meet a lot of great people and learn a lot, hopefully. So appreciate you all tuning in to the Flip Flop Investor Show, and we look forward to seeing you all again next week, Thursday, 4 p.m., and have a great week, everyone. Take care.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.